Every movement sent a dull throb through my forearm as I adjusted the stack of shipping manifests on my desk, the pale blue silk of my blouse sleeve carefully positioned to conceal the 16 crude black stitches that had become my shameful secret. The metallic scent of rain mixed with expensive Italian espresso permeated Volkov International's executive floor, the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing Seattle's gray skyline dissolving into morning fog like watercolor bleeding into wet paper. My fingers moved with practiced efficiency across the keyboard, though exhaustion made them feel weighted, made every keystroke an act of deliberate will rather than muscle memory. The underground clinic 3 nights ago hadn't asked questions, hadn't taken insurance, just stitched me up with the clinical efficiency of someone who'd seen worse, who knew better than to involve authorities or create paper trails. Troy's rage that night had been over something trivial. It always was. A question about his whereabouts. A tone he decided was disrespectful. The glass picture frame shattering. My arm going through it. His voice afterward, calm and reasonable, explaining how I'd made him do it, how I always pushed him too far. I pressed my left arm closer to my body, as if making myself smaller could somehow make the evidence disappear. The familiar weight of carefully applied foundation felt thick on my face, hiding the exhaustion that had nothing to do with late nights at the office and everything to do with the constant state of vigilance that had become my existence. Every footstep in the marble corridor made my shoulders tense. Every voice that carried through the glass walls sent my pulse into overdrive, not because I feared my boss, but because fear had become my baseline, the frequency I operated on without conscious thought. Darius Volkov was demanding but fair, his pale eyes missing nothing, his expectations impossibly high, but never unreasonable. I'd worked for him for 18 months now, long enough to understand that beneath his tailored Armani suits and cultured Russian accent existed something far more dangerous than a ruthless shipping magnate. Long enough to know his morning routine with the precision of someone whose survival depended on reading powerful men correctly. The elevator chimed softly, a sound that somehow carried weight despite its gentleness, and I heard the measured cadence of expensive Italian leather against polished marble. Mr. Volkov always arrived at precisely 8:15, his punctuality as absolute as everything else about him. In the months I'd worked here, I'd learned to read his moods by subtle tells. The set of his jaw, the controlled stillness of his hands, the temperature shift in his pale eyes that could freeze or thaw depending on circumstances I'd learned to anticipate. Today, something felt different. The air itself seemed charged, though I couldn't name why. My stomach clenched with an anxiety that had nothing to do with Troy and everything to do with instinct, the same instinct that told me when my boyfriend's mood was shifting toward violence, now warning me that something was about to change. "Good morning, Lena." His voice carried that distinctive timbre, smooth, controlled, with traces of Moscow winters and old-world formality that most Americans couldn't quite place. I looked up from my computer screen, forcing what I hoped passed for my usual professional composure despite the way my sleeve felt too tight against the hidden wound, despite the exhaustion that made even smiling feel like lifting weights. "Good morning, Mr. Volkov. Your 9 o'clock conference call with the Tokyo office has been rescheduled to 10 o'clock at their request. The revised contracts for the Mediterranean route are on your desk, and the quarterly reports from the New York warehouse arrived an hour ago." My voice sounded steadier than I felt, a small victory in a life that had become an endless series of small performances, each one requiring me to pretend I was whole when I felt increasingly fragmented. He paused beside my desk, close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated that made me think of power and control, though I couldn't explain the association. His pale eyes, ice blue in certain light, winter gray in others, swept over me with the same assessing quality he brought to contract negotiations, as if cataloging details most people would miss. For one terrible moment, I thought he might notice, might see past the carefully constructed facade to the truth I'd worked so hard to hide. The 16 black threads holding my arm together. The exhaustion that went bone deep. The fear that had become as familiar as breathing. But he simply nodded, his expression unreadable as carved stone. "The Bellini files from last month. I need them for a reference. Top shelf, East Library. My stomach dropped. The East Library. The top shelf. A reach that would require me to stretch upward, that would pull fabric tight against hidden wounds, that would expose what I'd spent 3 days desperately concealing. I forced myself to stand, forced my voice to remain level. Of course. I'll retrieve them immediately. As I walked toward his private office, every instinct screamed that this was a test, though whether I was being tested or something else entirely was happening, I couldn't say. All I knew was that in approximately 30 seconds, everything I'd hidden so carefully was about to be revealed to the one man in Seattle whose attention I could not afford. Behind me, I heard him follow. The measured sound of his footsteps. The click of his office door closing with a finality that made my breath catch. I thought I'd been so careful. I thought the stitches were hidden well enough. I was wrong. And by dawn, I would learn exactly what happened when Darius Volkov decided someone had damaged what he considered under his protection, whether I'd asked for that protection or not. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Volkov International-like accusations, each drop a reminder that Seattle's gray morning matched the bruised landscape of Lena's life. She moved through her routine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned that survival meant becoming invisible, coffee prepared exactly as Darius required it, black double espresso with no sugar, files organized by priority on the corner of his mahogany desk, her own suffering carefully compartmentalized behind a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. The 16 black stitches beneath her pale blue silk blouse throbbed with each movement, a souvenir from Troy's rage 3 nights ago when she'd made the mistake of questioning his whereabouts. The underground clinic hadn't asked questions. Neither would she. This was simply what her life had become, a series of wounds hidden and lies maintained, each day a performance of normalcy, while her arms screamed the truth she couldn't speak. During the morning briefing, she reached across his desk to hand him the revised Mediterranean shipping contracts. The motion pulled her sleeve upward, just an inch, barely anything, but it was enough. Time seemed to crystallize as Darius's pale eyes locked onto her wrist with predatory focus, tracking upward to where fabric concealed the damage. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. His jaw tightened with something that looked like barely suppressed violence, though she knew instinctively it wasn't directed at her. He said nothing. No questions. No concern. Just one word, delivered with terrifying quietness. Out. Lena retreated to her desk, pulse hammering against her ribs, trying to convince herself she'd escaped notice, that perhaps he hadn't seen, that maybe she'd misread the storm gathering in his expression. But through the glass walls of his office, she watched him pick up his phone, his face carved from ice as he spoke rapid Russian into the receiver. Her knowledge of the language was limited, but certain words carried through with devastating clarity. Background check, address, tonight. Her stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. He'd seen. He'd understood. And something had been set in motion, something that moved with the inexorable momentum of an avalanche, something she could no longer stop even if she wanted to. She pressed her hand against her concealed wound and tried to breathe through the panic, watching Darius through the glass as he made a second call, then a third, his expression never changing from that terrible, controlled fury. Whatever was coming, it was already in motion. And somehow, she knew her life would never be the same. Darius reviewed the Tokyo shipping manifests with the laser focus that had built his empire, both the legitimate international trade network and the shadow operations that funded it, but part of his attention remained fixed on the woman sitting just beyond his glass walls. He'd built his fortune on reading people, on identifying vulnerabilities and deciding whether to exploit or protect them depending on their value to his organization. Lena Thorne had become valuable in ways he hadn't fully examined, hadn't allowed himself to question too closely. The changes had been subtle at first. Long sleeves even during Seattle's brief summer heat. The careful way she moved, as if her body had learned to anticipate pain before it arrived. The micro-flinch when doors closed too loudly. The darkness under her eyes that even expertly applied makeup couldn't quite conceal. He'd cataloged each detail with the same methodical precision he brought to contract negotiations, piecing together a pattern that pointed to only one conclusion. The stitches had simply confirmed what he'd already suspected. During his video conference with the Tokyo office, Darius positioned his monitor so Lena's reflection appeared in the darkened corner of the screen. She sat at her desk, unconsciously cradling her left arm against her body, her professional mask slipping when she believed no one was watching. What replaced it was something haunted and resigned, the expression of someone who'd learned that suffering was simply the cost of existing. The cold rage that settled over him wasn't unfamiliar. It was the same ice-cold calculation he employed before eliminating business rivals, before ordering sanctions that ended careers or lives depending on the severity of the transgression. But this felt personal in a way his usual violence never did. Someone had damaged something under his protection. Whether she knew she was under his protection or not was irrelevant. The act itself was unacceptable. He ended the Tokyo call with efficient pleasantries, then made 3 calls in rapid succession. The first to Javier, his most trusted lieutenant. Prepare the Elliott Bay safe house tonight. Complete security protocol. The second to his information broker, a woman who could extract anyone's secrets from the digital ether, Lena, Thorne's boyfriend. Full background. I want everything: employment, financials, criminal history, known associates, daily patterns. 2 hours. The third to his cleanup crew, men who understood that some problems required permanent solutions. Stand by for immediate extraction operation. Details forthcoming. Through the glass, he watched Lena return to her work, still believing she'd hidden her suffering successfully. She had no idea that by dawn, the man responsible would cease to exist, erased as thoroughly as a shipping error corrected in the ledgers of an empire built on precision and absolute control. Darius orchestrated the revelation with the same tactical precision he brought to hostile acquisitions. 20 minutes after his final phone call, he summoned Lena into his office with a professional courtesy that made refusal impossible. I need the Adriatic contracts from last year. Top shelf, East Library. There's an urgent discrepancy I need to verify. She hesitated, a fractional pause that lasted less than a second but told him everything he needed to know. Her body understood what her mind was still denying, that she was about to be exposed, that the careful concealment she'd maintained was about to shatter, like the glass that had opened her arm 3 nights ago. Lena crossed to the floor-to-ceiling shelves that lined his private library, her movements careful and deliberate. As she stretched upward, reaching for the red leather binders on the highest shelf, her pale blue sleeve slid backward with the inevitability of gravity. For inches of angry red flesh held together by 16 crude black stitches appeared like evidence at a crime scene, the kind of work that screamed back-alley clinic, cash transactions, no questions asked, no records kept. The files slipped from her fingers and clattered to the marble floor. Darius was behind her instantly, his hand closing around her wrist with unexpected gentleness, firm enough to be immovable, careful enough not to cause additional pain. He examined the wound with clinical detachment that barely concealed the fury gathering beneath his controlled exterior like storm clouds on a deceptively calm horizon. How long have you been hiding this? His voice was terrifyingly quiet, the same tone he used in the moments before someone disappeared from existence, before problems were solved with permanent solutions. She stammered something about an accident in her apartment, a glass door. Nothing serious. Please don't worry about it. The lies tumbled out with practiced desperation, each one more transparent than the last. Don't. A single word, delivered with such absolute authority that it stripped away her fabrications like he was peeling back layers of a cover-up operation, exposing the truth beneath. His pale eyes, Arctic ice in the gray morning light, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Roll up your sleeve. All the way. It wasn't a request. With trembling fingers, Lena pushed the silk fabric upward, revealing the full extent of the damage. 16 stitches running from wrist nearly to elbow, the edges inflamed and poorly aligned, work so crude it would leave permanent scars, a roadmap of violence written across her skin in black thread and broken flesh. His jaw tightened with barely suppressed violence, and she realized with sudden clarity that the danger radiating through this room wasn't directed at her. It was being aimed at whoever had done this, building with the inexorable force of a verdict already reached and sentence about to be carried out. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and absolutely lethal. Who? It wasn't a question she could refuse to answer. Darius guided Lena to the leather sofa in his office with unexpected care, his hand steady against her back as if she might collapse without support. The click of the door lock echoed through the space. Not to trap her, she understood instinctively, but to ensure absolute privacy for what came next. He settled across from her, his posture relaxed but his pale eyes carrying the focused intensity of a predator who'd identified his prey. His questions came methodically, delivered with the same surgical precision he used to interrogate business rivals during hostile negotiations. How did this happen? When? Where were you? Who else knows? Lena tried her rehearsed lie about falling through a glass door, an accident, her own clumsiness. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Don't. He interrupted with cold authority that cut through her fabrications like a blade. Don't insult my intelligence with lies, Lena. You're a terrible liar. It's one of the things that makes you valuable in this organization, your inability to fabricate convincingly. So, don't continue. Something in his voice, not pity, but recognition of suffering from someone who understood violence intimately, shattered the defenses she'd maintained for 2 years. The truth spilled out in fragments. Troy's controlling behavior, the way he monitored her bank account and controlled her credit cards, his escalating rages over imagined slights, the isolation from friends and family who'd stopped calling after enough rejected invitations, the constant fear that had become her baseline state of existence. When she admitted this wasn't the first injury, just the worst she couldn't hide, Darius's expression became carved from stone, immovable and ancient as a gravestone marking something dead and buried. His phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. Javier's name illuminated the screen with what was surely an urgent update about shipment delays or customs issues. Darius silenced it without looking away from her, the gesture somehow more significant than any words of comfort could be. Give me his full name. The command was quiet but absolute. She hesitated, her breath catching, because naming Troy felt like signing a document she couldn't unsign, setting something irreversible into motion. She knew instinctively what giving that information meant, knew it the way prey animals know when a predator has decided to hunt. Lena. His voice shifted to absolute authority that permitted no refusal. His name. Now. Troy Foster. The words hung in the air like a death sentence pronounced in a courtroom with no appeals process. Darius nodded once, his decision made with the finality of a verdict already reached. You are very much my concern. Then he picked up his phone and spoke rapid Russian, too fast for her limited understanding, but certain words carried through with devastating clarity. Full background, known associates, daily patterns, tonight. She was listening to him assemble an intelligence dossier on Troy with the chilling efficiency of someone who'd orchestrated disappearances before. For the next 20 minutes, Darius interrogated Lena with surgical precision, extracting every detail about Troy Foster like he was planning a military operation rather than simply gathering information. What does he do for work? Pharmaceutical sales. What's his daily routine? She recited it mechanically. Gym at 6 a.m., client meetings through the afternoons, drinks with friends at Madison Pub most evenings, home by 11 unless he decided to punish her with silence, and a late return that reeked of bourbon and other women's perfume. Where does he spend his time? She listed addresses with the automaticity of someone who'd memorized escape routes and danger zones. His apartment in Capitol Hill, the gym on Pike Street, Madison Pub, sometimes the sports bar near the waterfront. Does he have family? A mother in Spokane. He calls every Sunday to complain about his difficult girlfriend. Friends? A rotating group of pharmaceutical reps who enable his worst instincts. Criminal connections? Not that she knows of, though she's noticed cash transactions that seem inconsistent with his legitimate income. She answered each question, part of her horrified at what she was enabling, because she understood now with absolute clarity that she was providing intelligence for something irrevocable, while another part felt a dangerous flutter of hope that maybe, finally, someone would make this stop. Finally, Darius asked the question that cut deepest. Why haven't you left him? She tried to explain the financial control, how he monitors her bank account, how her credit cards are in his name, how she has no savings because every dollar goes through his scrutiny. The isolation from friends who stopped inviting her places, family who grew tired of her excuses. Troy's promises after each incident that it would get better, that he'd change, that she just needed to stop provoking him. Her fear that leaving would make the violence worse, that he'd find her, that the statistics about women being killed when they try to escape are because he's convinced you that you're the problem. Darius cut through her explanations with brutal accuracy that took her breath away. That you're difficult, oversensitive, that you provoke him, that no one else would tolerate you. The precision of his understanding was shocking, almost more intimate than the gentle way he'd examined her stitches. Men like Troy Foster specialize in rewriting reality until their victims forget what safety feels like. They're predators who've learned that society will excuse almost anything they do as long as they're charming enough in public. His voice carried the cold certainty of someone who'd studied human predators from both sides, as victim and architect of violence. He stood, straightening his cuffs with deliberate calm that somehow made the moment more ominous. That's not going to happen. Not while you're under my protection. Javier will collect you from your apartment at 7 p.m. Pack what you need for a week. Your phone will be replaced with a secure device. Do not contact anyone, not friends, not family, certainly not Troy. Do you understand? She started to protest that she couldn't just disappear from her life, that people would ask questions, that Troy would. His gaze pinned her in place with immovable authority. This is not negotiable. At precisely 7 p.m., a knock echoed through Lena's cramped apartment with the measured cadence of someone who expected compliance. Javier stood in the hallway, a quiet, efficient man with watchful dark eyes and a concealed weapon beneath his tailored jacket that she wasn't supposed to notice, but absolutely did. His instructions were delivered with professional courtesy that made them no less absolute. Pack clothes for a week. Personal items only. Leave your phone on the counter. When she asked where they were going, his response revealed nothing beyond polite certainty. Somewhere safe. Mr. Volkov insists. The drive took them across Seattle through rain-slicked streets, the city's lights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered diamonds. They crossed the city to a luxury high-rise overlooking Elliott Bay, rain streaming down the windows like the city itself was weeping for what was being set in motion. The penthouse was beautiful in its impersonality, designer furniture in shades of gray and cream, a fully stocked kitchen with appliances she'd never be able to afford, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a glittering skyline view that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. It was the kind of place where important people hid when they needed to disappear from the world. Javier handed her a new phone, its screen displaying exactly 3 contacts: his number, Darius's number, and emergency services. Nothing else. No history. No digital footprint connecting her to the life she'd left behind an hour ago. His final instructions were delivered with the same professional courtesy. Don't leave the apartment. Don't answer the door for anyone except me or Mr. Volkov. If you need anything, call. Then he was gone, and Lena stood alone in this beautiful cage with only the Seattle skyline and her racing thoughts for company. She tried Troy's phone first, disconnected, the automated voice informing her the number was no longer in service. His social media accounts had vanished completely, profiles deleted as if they'd never existed. When she called his workplace from the apartment's landline, they sounded genuinely concerned. Troy Foster hadn't shown up for work yesterday and wasn't answering calls. Had she heard from him? She hung up without answering, panic and relief warring in her chest with equal intensity. Around 2 a.m., her new phone illuminated the darkness with a single text from Darius. You're safe now. Sleep. And somehow, impossibly, she did. For the first time in 2 years, Lena slept through the night without nightmares, without jerking awake at phantom sounds, without the hypervigilance that had become her constant companion. When she woke to dawn light streaming across marble floors and rain drumming softly against glass, Troy Foster had been erased from existence as thoroughly as if he'd never been real at all. Darius arrived at the penthouse on the third evening carrying takeout from the Thai restaurant Lena had mentioned loving months ago during a casual conversation about Seattle's food scene. Another detail he'd remembered, filed away with the precision he brought to everything, and now weaponized into an act of care that felt more intimate than any declaration could be. He settled across from her at the dining table with the calm of someone who decided complete honesty was more strategic than deception. He unpacked containers of pad CEW and green curry with methodical efficiency, then waited. She understood he was giving her space to ask the questions she'd spent 3 days formulating, rehearsing, dreading. "Did you kill him?" Her voice was steadier than she'd expected, carrying none of the tremor that had defined her speech for 2 years. Darius didn't flinch or deflect. "I gave orders that ensured Troy Foster will never harm you again. The specifics of execution are compartmentalized for everyone's protection, including yours. But yes, I am directly responsible for his permanent removal from your life." The clinical language somehow made it worse. More real. She pressed forward, demanding to know how he could justify murder, how he reconciled taking a life regardless of Troy's crimes, how he slept at night knowing what he'd done. His response came with clinical pragmatism that was somehow more chilling than rage would have been. "The legal system would have failed you. You could have filed a police report. He'd be released within hours. You could have obtained a restraining order, a piece of paper that doesn't stop fists or fury. You could have pressed charges and spent years in court while he escalated his violence. Statistically, the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is immediately after leaving. That's when men like Troy kill. I simply eliminated the threat before it became lethal." He leaned forward slightly, his pale eyes holding hers without apology or shame. "I operate in a world where violence is a tool, and I'm fluent in its application. You're sitting across from a man who views murder as problem-solving, who's eliminated dozens of threats over the years with the same efficiency I bring to contract negotiations. If that makes me a monster, I accept the designation." His voice dropped lower, carrying a weight that felt like truth rather than manipulation. "But I'm a monster who ensures you'll never wake up afraid again. I'm a monster who noticed when you started wearing long sleeves in summer, who saw the fear you tried to hide, who acted when everyone else would have told you to file paperwork and hope for the best. Can the justice system promise you safety? Can restraining orders guarantee you'll survive? Can good intentions stop a man who's already demonstrated he's willing to hurt you?" The question hung between them, unanswerable because they both knew the truth. The statistics. The stories. The women who'd done everything right and still ended up dead. Darius set down his fork with deliberate precision, the sound of metal against porcelain marking a shift in conversation from philosophical debate to tactical briefing. "Your situation is more precarious than a simple case of domestic violence resolved through illegal means. There are converging dangers you need to understand before you make any decisions about your future." He outlined the threats with the detached precision of a chess master analyzing his board. First, Agent Gallo, a federal detective with the dogged persistence of someone who genuinely believed in justice, currently building a RICO case against Volkov International. Troy's disappearance, if connected to Darius, could provide the leverage Gallo needed to bring down the entire operation and everyone connected to it, including Lena herself. Second, and more immediately lethal, was Milo Bain, Troy's supplier and a mid-level trafficker with connections to organized crime. Troy had served as a distribution node for pharmaceutical-grade opioids diverted from legitimate supply chains, moving product through his sales network with the perfect cover of legitimacy. His sudden disappearance had cost Milo significant revenue and, worse, raised questions about security breaches in his network. Milo's people have already identified that Troy was involved with someone at Volkov International, Darius continued, his voice carrying clinical certainty. "Which makes you either an asset to acquire for information or leverage to use against me. Agent Gallo is searching for any weakness in my organization's facade, and a missing person connected to my executive secretary could provide that opening." He paused, and something shifted in his expression, a crack in the calculated facade revealing something almost vulnerable beneath the armor of cold authority. "I'm offering you a choice," he said, and the fact that he was offering one rather than simply deciding her fate felt significant in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Option 1. I provide you with a new identity, substantial financial resources, and transportation to any city in the world. You disappear completely, with no connection to me, this organization, or Seattle. You'll be free. The pause carried weight, heavy as a coffin lid closing. But I cannot guarantee your safety from Milo if he's determined to find you, and I won't be there to protect you. The legal system may eventually connect Troy's disappearance to you, and you'll face those questions alone. He leaned forward, and for the first time she saw something beneath the cold authority, something that looked almost like fear of rejection, vulnerability he rarely showed to anyone. Option 2, stay. You become part of my inner circle with full transparency about my operations, legal and illegal. In exchange, I need your loyalty and discretion. You'll be protected by everything I've built, but you'll also be complicit in what that protection costs. His pale eyes held hers with unusual intensity. I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering partnership. I want you in my life, in my world, permanently. But only if you choose it with full knowledge of what that means. Lena took 48 hours to decide, time Darius granted without pressure, though she noticed the tension radiating from his shoulders when he visited, the way he checked his phone more frequently than usual, the slight tightness around his pale eyes that suggested her answer mattered in ways his carefully controlled demeanor couldn't quite conceal. She spent the time examining every angle of her decision with the same methodical precision he brought to contract negotiations, the morality of accepting protection from a criminal, the pragmatism of survival versus principle, the seduction of being genuinely valued versus the danger of that value becoming possession. Most terrifying was her recognition that Darius's obsessive attention, the memorized coffee order, the noticed fear, the decisive lethal action, represented a form of care she'd never experienced. Troy had claimed to love her while systematically destroying her sense of self. Darius made no claims of love, but treated her as something precious enough to kill for. The contradiction should have repelled her. Instead, it pulled her toward a truth she'd been avoiding since that first moment he'd touched her injured arm with unexpected gentleness. She didn't want to leave. When she called him, her voice was clear and certain. I have conditions. Darius arrived within 20 minutes, and she saw something in his expression she'd never witnessed before, anticipation mixed with uncertainty, as if her answer possessed the power to affect him in ways his enemies never could. Her terms were non-negotiable, delivered with the same firmness he used in business dealings, complete honesty between them with no lies of omission, no decisions about her safety or future made without her input and consent, explicit acknowledgement that she was choosing this as an autonomous adult rather than being rescued as a helpless victim, and one absolute boundary. She would not participate in or witness violence against innocent people. Darius listened to each condition without interruption, then accepted without hesitation. The respect in his eyes was unmistakable and more affecting than any declaration of feeling could be. Then Lena added the truth that had been building since he first examined her stitches with clinical care that barely concealed protective fury. I'm not staying because I need you to save me. I'm staying because you saw me when I'd become invisible to myself. Because you acted when everyone else would have told me to file a police report and hope for the best. And because she met his pale gaze directly, refusing to look away, I recognize something in you that matches something in me. We're both people who understand the world is more violent than others want to admit, that safety is something you have to fight for, and that sometimes survival requires standing next to the monster who'll burn the world before letting it hurt you. Darius crossed the room with controlled purpose, and for the first time, he touched her face, not clinically assessing injuries, but with gentleness that contradicted everything he was. His palm cupped her cheek with devastating tenderness. Then we face the threats together, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of an unbreakable vow. And you'll never hide stitches again. Lena's choice was made in blood and honesty. She chose the monster who saw her when she'd become invisible to herself. But Milo Bane is coming for revenge, Agent Gallo is closing in, and the stitches on her arm are just the beginning of the scars this world will leave. Will Darius's protection be enough? Or will Lena's decision to stand beside the devil cost her everything? If you're craving more dark mafia romance where obsession meets protection and danger dances with desire, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens when Lena faces the threats converging on all sides. Drop a comment below. Would you have made Lena's choice? Stay and claim power in the darkness, or run and hope for safety? I want to know where you stand. And if you love this story of dangerous devotion, check out the next video where another woman discovers that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the only one who can keep you safe. Remember, in the darkest romances, love isn't soft. It's survival. Until next time, embrace the darkness.